So both of you kind of agreed that counter-cyclical, or like turning the spigot on when the economy is down, is important. Would you mind just going a little more in depth as to why that is true? Is it just because like what we're reading, or like why is it so important that we only do it during times of downturn?
So the basic idea is that recessions are times when the economy is producing below its potential output. So demand is low, and we have excess capacity. So what we need to do is stimulate demand. You don't want to stimulate demand when times are good, because the idea is that it can just generate inflation. And so what programs like unemployment insurance and food stamps do is they provide a set of rules the government has to follow, because they've targeted the spending to certain eligibility criteria in a way that during a recession, more people are eligible, ergo there's more money being pumped into the transfers, and that stimulates aggregate demand, because in particular the people who are getting those transfers, the unemployed and families on food stamps, they're spending much more day to day than they would otherwise. They have a high marginal propensity to consume, as economists call it. Whereas if you give a rich person $1 in a recession, they don't spend it, it doesn't really do anything. And so people think that having means-tested programs, even if you don't agree, even if you think means-tested programs like welfare have huge efficiency costs because it leads to bad behavior, teach your kids to go on welfare, as someone cited, it still serves this benefit of helping the recession end faster. Whereas if you have a UBI, it's always on, the level of spending is constant, and it does nothing to yield extra stimulus during a recession.
How do you think the UBI would impact inflation?
To the extent there's data on that, it seems like it would not have a huge impact. We are limited in what we can compare to because we haven't done it in a developed nation. But the best evidence to date is probably a large ongoing experiment in Kenya that's actually happening at the village level. They've been studying general equilibrium effects around that, and have found that there's been significant economic growth and no signs of inflation there. That's also backed up. There's some experimentation in Mexico around providing extra cash to certain areas where it was supposed to be spent on food, but people could spend it on whatever they want. Similarly, did not see inflationary effects there. So to the extent that there is evidence around that. And this also depends a lot on how you finance it. That if it's redistributed, that on its own wouldn't necessarily suggest inflation, but that's the evidence that's out there now.
What do you think the most probable plan for funding a UBI would be? Would it be like a value-added tax, debt spending, or something else?
There's a lot of debate around that. There isn't one particular thing. Value-added tax has gotten a lot more attention because that was the primary financing mechanism of Andrew Yang's proposal for universal basic income. Prior to that, it was not under discussion so much. Using progressive taxation, like more progressive income tax, a wealth tax, in particular, a carbon tax has been one that's been discussed for a lot of time. And some proposals do include at least some degree of deficit spending. But generally, there's relatively few proposals that are talking about entirely funding it through deficit spending.
I had a question just generally about the negotiation debates. I'm pretty unsure what would actually happen with UBI with $1,000. Will it actually strike more? I feel like that's already unhealthy right now. We don't do that strike funds. And second, more importantly, why would employers just pay less if they know that their employees are making more money? So why not control the revenues?
There are theoretical arguments both directions. So, as I was describing earlier, the stuff with the lottery, the usual explanation for why people earn less and work less when you give them money is just that they're more satiated, right? They have more money, so they have less demand to earn. And so they'll accept a less demanding job. And one way of thinking about that is they're spending more of their total wealth, which includes the value of their time, on leisure. They buy more leisure just like they would buy more goods. So that's what's economists call the neoclassical model of labor markets and the income effect. The other model, which involves imperfectly competitive labor markets, which is what I study all day, is that labor markets don't work like that exactly. It's not that there's just some price of your labor, but you kind of have to fight for it, and you get paid based upon a mix of what you're worth and what you can produce and what your next best option is. And usually, there's two different types of models. One model is for people that aren't unemployed. Usually we think that your next best option is the most recent job you had. And so there's all this fighting about, say, collusion between employers. So, Intel, Apple, all these companies got sued for having a no-call list over the engineers, no poaching agreements. Just like fast food restaurants actually often have no poaching agreements, which suppress competition and make it so that wages are lower than they would have otherwise been. The UBI is more about workers whose outside option is that they're not working at all. Like maybe they got displaced from their previous job and they're unemployed. So then the UBI really is important potentially for their bargaining position, right? Because if you had nothing and you're nothing besides unemployment insurance, and a firm, you finally find a job and a firm makes you a take it or leave it offer, they might pay you much less than if you already had a job. Estimates in the literature for that are that the penalty for being hired from unemployment versus from already having a job, it's about 6 to 10% of wages. So when I say wages, I mean hourly wages. So there's a penalty there, and maybe the UBI can help with that. How much it would help people that already have a job is much less clear to me. I don't think we know the answer to that.
I would just add another area where there hasn't been much study yet is, connected to the idea is that if you're getting something like UBI, you will spend a little bit less of your time working. Having that extra time allow you to then pursue a path that can transition you into better employment. So getting additional training, or simply being able to take the time to look more thoroughly for a job, since there's not seamless transitions between jobs, and so oftentimes the lack of time capacity for people does act as a barrier in itself to finding other employment.
I guess this is awesome, but what do you think are the merits of the argument about welfare disincentivizing work, creating a sort of like poverty trap, where after a certain amount of money, there is a benefit to people?
So I think that argument was quite compelling during the Reagan era, where the implicit tax rate on earnings while on welfare was, in some cases, 100%. And that's why during the Clinton administration, we had welfare reform, the pro-rata reform that switched us over to TANF. And in my own research, I've tried to quantify how big the disincentive effect is associated with people wanting to, what's called opt into welfare, meaning if otherwise you were going to earn just a little bit over the federal poverty line, which is usually the eligibility limit for being in welfare, when these programs rolled out, you should have reduced your earnings a little bit to qualify for the benefits. And I do find that effect is real, but it's very small. And so I think that's consistent with a large array of evidence in labor economics that these kinds of price effects on earnings, they're real, but they tend to be pretty muted. And so I'm not very worried about programs like welfare, like the EITC, the income tax credit phasing out. I don't think that has huge depressive effects on earnings, and that's because the dominant fact that people have found in the literature is that most of the behavior responses are on what's called the extensive margin. That, like, when you give people big bonuses for working. You incentivize work by reducing the implicit tax rate very low. People will work. But if someone was already going to work full time, they probably aren't going to take a lower skilled job just because they face a higher marginal tax rate. And so I think phase outs don't have disastrous effects on earnings or hourly wages or job choice. And so I think that the problem with the way that means-tested programs are set up right now is not these disincentive effects, it's that in some cases it becomes very hard to get the transfer and to remain eligible for it. So for instance, for political reasons, with welfare reform on TANF, they kick off families after a fixed timeline. And so conservatives viewed that as a great success. Oh, it got all these single moms to work. On the other hand, is it really a great thing for the kids if a single mom is working just because there's no transfer available anymore because she's used up all of her credits, all the eligible months on the welfare program? So even from a targeting perspective, there are some advantages of the UBI because it's meant to be permanent. For men, there are very few transfer programs they can qualify for. You can get unemployment insurance for a while. In some cases, during the Great Recession, many men got food stamps, but they're fairly transitory programs and they're unstable. And so an advantage of the UBI is stability, although I should say that you could achieve that same stability by making the tax system much more progressive. But there doesn't seem to be political support for that at the moment, and in the absence of that, maybe this is a second best approach.
I have a question about value-added tax. So I think in Yang's plan, it wouldn't apply to basic necessities like food or clothes. If that were true, what do you think the impact would be on the poor people?
So it would be less regressive in that case, but still regressive overall. Yeah. I mean, if you couple it with a basic income cash transfer, those two things together become regressive. But that's assuming everyone gets it. If anyone is left out from UBI, then the value-added tax hits them hard without them getting any offset in the transfer.